Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you, and welcome to the Primetime at BU Library. The BU Library's mission is to encourage lifelong learning beyond the classroom for the entire Bethel community. And it's collaboration with the Friends of BU Library and many other different offices on our campus. Next Thursday, February 16th, John Steen will be presenting an International Study Abroad Spotlight entitled Captured in Trade, the Slave Castles in West Africa. But today, we are going to welcome Professor Angela Shannon and Dr. Herb Johnson as they present our 4th annual Black History Month and Music and Literary Review. A little about Angela. She started in Bethel in 2006. She received her BA from Florida State University and her MFA from Warren Wilson College. Angela is the author of a poetry book called Singing the Blues Together, and her poems have been published in a variety of journals and anthologies, including Where One Ends, Another Begins, 150 Years in Minnesota Poetry, Beyond the Frontier, African American Poetry for the 21st Century, and the textbook of multicultural reading. Collection 1, Many Voices Literature series, and Professor Shannon's Courier poem, Root Woman, premiered in the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater in Evanston, Illinois. Dr. Herb Johnson. I could say a lot about him, but I'll stick to the script. He started Bethel in 2008. He received his education from Evangel University, his master's from University of Missouri, Kansas City, and his doctorate of music from Manhattan School of Music. His area of expertise are piano, piano theory, and piano pedagogy. He is an active solo and collaborative pianist in the Twin Cities and participates in numerous musical activities in the metropolitan area, including chamber music recitals, worship services, and sacred concerts. Please let's welcome Angela Shannon, who will go first, and then Dr. Herb Johnson will follow.
Well, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Donna.
What's
that?
Yeah, not there yet.
Well, thank you so much. That felt very formal. A little frightening. Okay. Thanks for coming out. It's always a blessing to share Black history, and it happens, all the time. But I especially like February because this is when we really get a chance to elaborate on it. So I'm going to read some poems by two poets from the late 1800s, early 1900s, during that time, just to show that there were people writing and publishing well before today, and that we're standing on the shoulders of incredible literary giants. So I'm going to start with Paul Laurence Dunbar. And Dunbar was the first African-American writer that was really internationally acclaimed. He published lots of work, was able to do extremely well educationally, got great reviews as well. He also wrote in the Black vernacular, loved culture, loved his people, wrote in the Black vernacular, but he also wrote in standard English as well. Those particular pieces were not as well known, so I'm going to read a couple one in the Black vernacular as well as one in standard English. I'll start with one in standard English, but he was very well versed. So Paul Laurence Dunbar. This is Ode to Ethiopia. O Mother Race, to thee I bring this pledge of faith unwavering, this tribute to thy glory. I know the pains which thou didst feel when slavery crushed thee with his heel, with
thy dear blood of glory. Sad days were those, all sad indeed. But through the land of fruitful seed of better times were growing. The plant of freedom upward sprung and spread its leaves so fresh and young. Its blossoms now are blowing. On every hand in this fair land, proud Ethiopia's swarthy children stand beside their fairer neighbor. The forests flee before their stroke, their hammers ring, their forges smoke. They stare in honest labor. They tread the fields where honor calls. Their voices sound through senate halls in majesty and power. To right by clean the hymns they sing, up to the skies in beauty ring, and bolder grow each hour. Be proud, my race and mine and soul. Thy name is writ on glory's scroll in characters of fire. High mid the clouds of fame's bright sky, thy banner blazoned foes now fly, and truth shall lift them higher. Go on and up, our souls and eyes shall follow thy continuous rise. Our ears shall list the story from bards who from thy root shall spring, and proudly tune their lyres to sing of Ethiopia's glory. So just a poem about his love, really of heritage and love of Africa. And then Sympathy. Sympathy is a poem. Maya Angelou wrote one of her biographies is called, autobiographies is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And she actually gets the title of that particular book from this poem, Sympathy, that Paul Laurence Dunbar wrote, which ties in with a struggle, how African Americans struggled during this particular time frame. And there's also Paul Laurence Dunbar as well as Francis Harper both wrote a lot about music, because music was something that really carried people through struggles. It was comforting. There were work songs, there were spirituals, and both of them write about music, and I'm going to read a couple pieces about song as well. But I just want to sing a little bit of a spiritual that I think ties in with the whole theme of what the literature is about. Done made my vow. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. I know what the caged bird feels at last, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stares soft through the springing grass, and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice stills, I know what the caged bird feels. I know why the caged bird beats his wing, till his blood is red on the cruel bars, for he must fly back to his perch and cling, when he fain would be on the bar swing, and pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with their keener sting. I know why he beats his wing. I know why the caged bird sings on me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It's not a curl of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. and make my vow to the Lord. And I won't turn back. I will go. I shall go to see what the end is going to be. To see what the end is going to be. The song. Thou art the soul of a summer's day. Thou art the breath of the rose. But the summer is fled and the rose is dead. Where are they gone? Who knows? Who knows? Thou art the blood of my heart, O hearts. Thou art my soul's repose. But my heart is dumb and my soul is dumb. Where art thou, love? Who knows? Who knows? Thou art the hope of my after years, sun for my winter snows. But the years go by 'neath the clouded sky. Where shall we meet? Who knows? Who knows? That's for Valentine's Day by Dunbar. So, and I'm going to move to Francis Harper. And I think there's I love the theme, one more river to cross, because we are always crossing rivers. And there's always water that carries us over, and music carries us as well. So there's always a drive to move forward. And that's one of the things that Paul Laurence Dunbar did in his work. He embraced African American culture, with the vernacular, being able to write in a voice that people spoke in at that particular time. And also, he embraced the standard English, being able to do both. So, Francis Harper. And Francis Harper actually was born early 1800s and died in 1911. And she was born much earlier than Paul Laurence Dunbar. She wrote a tremendous amount of work. And was very well known in America for her advocacy for slavery. She did a lot of lecturing, wrote a lot of essays, as well as a lot of literature. She didn't have the type of international acclaim that Dunbar had, but she worked with many, many organizations, and in many ways was ahead of her time when you think of women's rights and civil rights and things like that. She was very much ahead of her time. So Frances E.W. Harper, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. I'm going to read a few of her poems as well, and you'll get a sense of her voice. She very much believed in education, and she wrote a wonderful piece called Learning to Read that I'll read as well. And it really speaks to how the importance of education and how during a time of slavery, African Americans learned how to read. So learning to read. Very soon the Yankee teachers came down and set up school. But oh, how the rebels did hate it. It was against their rule. Our masters always tried to hide book learning from our eyes. Knowledge didn't agree with slavery. 'Twould make us all too wise. But some of us would try to steal a little from the book and put the words together and learn by hook or crook. I remember Uncle Cadwell, who took pot liquor fat and greased the pages of his book and hid it in his hat. And had his master ever seen the leaves upon his head, he had thought them greasy papers, but nothing to be read. And there was Mrs. Turner's Ben, who heard the children spell and picked the words right up by heart and learned to read them well. Well, the northern folks kept sending the Yankee teachers down, and they stood right up and helped us, though the rebs did sneer and frown. And I longed to read my Bible, for precious words it said, but when I begun to learn it, folks just shook their heads and said there's no use trying. Oh, Chloe, you're too late. But I was rising 60, I had no time to wait. So I got a pair of glasses and straight to work I went, and never stopped till I could read the hymns and testament. Then I got a little cabin, a place to call my own, and I felt as independent as the queen up on her throne. Guide my footsteps while I run this race. Guide my footsteps while I run this race. Guide my footsteps while I run this race. Because I don't want to run this race in vain. Songs for my people. Let me make the songs for my people. Songs for the old and young. Songs to stare like a battle cry wherever they are sung. Not for the clashing of saves, for carnage nor for strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of men with more abundant life. Let me make the songs for the weary, amid life's fever and fret, till hearts shall relax their tension and careworn brows forget. Let me sing for little children before their footsteps stray, sweet anthems of love and duty to float over life's highway. I would sing for the poor in age when shadows dim their sight, of the bright and restful mansions where there should be no night. Our world, so worn and weary, needs music pure and strong to hush the jingle and discards of sorrow, pain, and wrong. Music to soothe all that sorrow, till war and crime shall cease, and the hearts of men grown tender girdle the world with peace. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
This is, I guess, our fourth year of doing this together, right, Angela?
Right.
Yeah, and I think when we started doing this, we took it like a literary and musical review, so we did a lot of different things. And what we decided this year is we try to focus in a little bit more on just a few artists, as opposed to maybe trying to cover the whole gamut. Of course, it's just very broad anyway. It's impossible to do it in about 30, 35 minutes. But, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Florence B. Price. I think I played one of her pieces last year, Silk Hat, Walking Cane, that's what it was. And the piece I'm going to play for you today by Florence Price is from the same set of pieces. They're called Dances in the Cane Breaks. And Florence Price was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and died in Chicago in 1953, 1887 to 1953. First African-American woman to have a symphony performed by a major orchestra, and that would be the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. This was quite an accomplishment. She also did a lot of study in Chicago and also in the Northeast in New England Conservatory of Music. She taught in Little Rock. She also chaired the music department at Clark University in Atlanta for a period of time. But most of her time she spent composing and performing, and more than over 300 works that she composed in a variety of mediums, both for piano, for orchestra, chamber music, solo instruments, etc. I tried to find some information about cane breaks, because I think that's very interesting, dances in the cane breaks. And all I could find is that it's a dense thicket of cane in a region in Alabama, and the other place that I looked at and found, it said tall grass in the southern U.S. So there is this sense that I'm getting that when she wrote piano music to reflect this idea of dancing in the canebrakes, that maybe, you know, in the happier times of slavery for African Americans, you know, there'd be some times of just enjoying life, enjoying being outside, maybe on a Saturday afternoon, or maybe, you know, at twilight, or maybe on a Sunday, if you had off from your duties and work, and, you know, so that would be the time to, you know, maybe come up with some dances, some happy times, some ways of just relieving the pressure. So this particular piece that I'm going to play for you is called Nimble Feet. And it's very syncopated. One of the things that Florence talks about is that rhythm is vital to just about any expression of life in the life of an African American. That rhythm is just really key. And she really lived by this principle, and you can really sense this. A lot of syncopation, a lot of accents that maybe will jar you a little bit, but it's this is a fun piece, and maybe you'll kind of can see the feet dancing as I'm playing Nimble Feet. Thank you. The next composer that I'd like to talk about in a little more detail is Nathaniel Debt. Our Nathaniel Debt, born in Drummondville, Ontario in 1882, died in 1943, buried in Niagara Falls, New York. Nathaniel Debt is remembered chiefly for his choral works that he based on African American spirituals, and for the works for solo piano that he composed in a romantic style. It's kind of interesting, as we looked at the composers and artists we tried to stay sort of in that period of Reconstruction into, just about the Second World War. So it's kind of interesting to see that we're talking about really a lot of this romantic influence, this idea of the crossing of the arts. Because it's kind of interesting, you were, Angela was sharing so much, and so much was talked about in terms of music, and she even sung some things. And with Nathaniel Debt, nature is very important, poetry is key, and for many romantic composers this was true as well. So he composed in that style, and it's also interesting that, a lot of the pieces that he composed were well into the 20th century, but he was still, there were a number of composers that still composed in what we would say a romantic style. He spent a good portion of his first part of his career as a choral director at the Hampton Institute, another historically black college. But before that, I should mention this, he was the first African-American to graduate with a BA in music from Oberlin Conservatory, one of our finest conservatories in the nation in Ohio. And his major was in piano and composition. And so there were these two twin things in terms of his interests, his musical interests, choral works and piano right through till the end of his life. We as musicians like often to divide periods for composers into 3 periods. There's something magical about that number 3. We do it with people like Beethoven. It really does fit well for this composer. Once he graduated, he did compose a number of pieces, 2 suites for piano in the 1910s, 1910 to about 1914, and actually they are some of his most popular music. Magnolia, Suite for Piano, and In the Bottoms. Keep in mind, he's an African-American composer, but yet he's a northern composer. So when he went to Virginia and parts south, he did a lot of touring in that area. He was really captivated by just the terrain and the beauty of the South. Magnolia trees. There's another suite that's called Cinnamon Grove that he talks about later on. So he was really enamored with that. In fact, last year I think I played Honey, and I think this came from the suite In the Bottoms. The second period for him would be the 1920s, and that's where we have Enchantment and Cinnamon Grove. And again, these are suites, so they were collections of pieces that referred to nature, referred to various things, like I said, Cinnamon Grove. In the late 30s and into the early 40s, 1940s, 2 last sets of pieces. Interesting. First one is Tropic Winter. Again, a northern composer. By this time, in the early 40s, he had most of his what he was doing was way in the north. I mean, like in Buffalo, Niagara Falls area. So I guess he had visions of wanting to get back to south where it was warmer. The last set of pieces, 1942, 1943, so very close to the time he passed away of a heart attack, he composed 8 Bible vignettes. He had a love for the Bible, and it's interesting to see that he carried from that idea of spirituals. African Americans really believed in the whole sense of that sense of being one with the people of Israel and being able to be free from the chains in Egypt. Let my people go, etc. And so he, in these vignettes, there's some references to that. But this particular piece I'm going to play for you is called Martha Complained. Now, as soon as I say that, I think many of you should remember the story about Martha, Mary, and Jesus. And so this is going to be a very programmatic kind of piece I'm going to play for you. In fact, I'm going to try to give you some things to listen for before I play it. So pay attention very closely. But it is an attempt by the composer to take a New Testament story and make it into a mini musical drama, literally. And so and it's pretty hard to do. Composers have tried to, in 4 or 5 minutes, do this with voice and piano, like Schubert does this really well. But to actually try to do this on the piano it's really a little bit of a stretch, but I think it kind of works. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is I will start playing, and I will play what is called an ostinato. It's just a pattern that keeps repeating over and over again. And let me give you a little bit of that before. So you'll hear that over and over again. And it's supposed to represent the drudgery of the work that Martha's doing. Okay, she's just literally slaving around, moving, taking care of dishes, food, everything, while Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to Jesus as he's teaching. And so then there's this beautiful melody. In fact, the style of this piece is really different from a lot of what Nathaniel Debt did. It's very bluesy, very chromatic, and so you'll hear a very beautiful melody in the upper registers, but that's still just all setting the background. It's really no discussion has happened yet. What happens is that at some point, and it's supposed to represent her just really getting tired of things, and so you'll hear this fancy chord, dissonant, very sharp and very dissonant sound. Okay. So that's supposed to be the last straw. It's like she just dropped the plate, or she just dropped some food or something. But she's just really, really mad, and she's looking over at Jesus. Then somehow I guess she gets his attention, maybe. And so at that point, she begins talking, and literally in the score it says parlando. So the music will be very. It will sound very, very alone, and in fact, you'll only hear one line kind of poking around, and that's supposed to be her speaking to the Lord, saying, "Don't you hear that I'm doing all this work and Mary's not paying attention? She's just listening to you. She should be helping me." Okay, so that part happens, and then the next part is Jesus, and you'll know it's Jesus because it's in the lower register of the piano. So you'll hear this, and this is supposed to be Jesus saying, "Martha." That's him saying Martha, and then you know what he says after that. He says, you're really bothered about a lot of things. You really should just be focused on one thing. And Mary has chosen to be focused on that thing, and she's going to receive a blessing for it. Well, for some of us, we might think, it still doesn't answer the issue of fairness, But what happens is, once Jesus has made his statement and trying to explain what Martha should really be focused on, then that little ostinato thing comes back again, but it changes. And it actually goes from sort of that minor bluesy sound to something a little bit more bright. And it's supposed to represent a change in attitude, Martha. And that maybe she finally got it. So let's see what you think after I play, okay? This is Martha Complaining. I think we're done. Thank you. It's been lovely. Thank you for coming.